Hey fellas, what is up? This is Dan here as always, and I want to go over some things here in a quick video, kind of going into some detail weathering features. Now, in past videos here on my channel, I've kind of gone over some things, really more over in terms of the light weatherings that I do. A lot of, I've kind of shown some of my basic rust spot techniques, a lot of my kick-up techniques and stuff like that, But I feel that in terms of the fine detail weathering, like say rust streaks, the rust spots and all that, I feel that in a separate video I should go over in detail those particular stages, because these are some of the fine details. These are the things that really make or break a model, because if you look at a picture of an old covered hopper or an old tank car that's just covered in rust spots, and I mean covered in them, you will see how much of a difference just the rust spots or the rust streaks alone make. You can weather that tank car to look like it does in the photo, but if you don't put the rust spots in it, it won't look anything like that. I think we can all agree on that. And that's why I think this is such an important thing to be doing on these models. I see a lot of modelers, even today, when they weather a model, they'll just throw the grime on the underbody, rust up the couplers, rust up the roof, boom, done. Okay, that's all right. And I think, if you really want to get detailed, I think you really... rust spots are one of those important techniques. Rust spots, rust streaks, anything like that is extremely important in going into that next level of detail with your models. And this is why I want to make this video today, just to go in a specific detail in just that feature. We won't be going over in car body weathering and all that, because you guys have seen enough videos of me weathering tank cars, hoppers, box cars, whatever, and doing that. You guys all know how to do that. You all have your own techniques for doing that. And this video, like I said, is just particularly for rust spots and rust streaks. So what I'm going to do is I'll try to get the camera set up here, and we'll try to look at this tank car that I'm doing. And I'll try to get as many good angles as possible. And forgive me if I get my hand in the way or my head gets in the way or anything in the camera. It's just hard for me to kind of be concentrating on such a fine, these fine effects, and also paying attention to my camera monitor because it's so small. So if anything like that happens, I'll try to edit it out as best I can. If not, I apologize for that. But like I said, we'll just try to. I'll try to show you the best I can these techniques as we get up close here to the tank car. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I'll go ahead and set the camera up, and we'll get started. Okay, so this is the tank car I'm working on. This is an Atlas caustic soda tank car, and I'm doing this one. Just kind of as really a demonstration of the rust techniques and the rust spots that I'm doing to this. So what you'll need, to get started are particularly fine tip brushes like these. These are some really nice brushes I picked up at my local hobby shop, and you can see how fine the tips are on these. I'm not sure the exact gauge of these, but these are really nice. And these are by a company called Atlas Brush Co. And they make some really nice brushes. These are some that I've been using for a very, very long time, and I like to stock up on these when I can. And you want to preferably use some that are completely straight, or even you can see the tips are nice and sharp on these, and this is what you want to use for this particular technique. So I'm going to go ahead and put these down real quick. The acrylic paints, which I'm going to be using, are acrylics, like I said, are my Anita's Earth Brown, my Americana acrylic, burnt umber, or burnt sienna rather, sorry. And I'll also be using a little bit of my Anita's straight black, flat black rather, for this. So I'm going to go ahead and take a cap off, and how I'm going to do this is I'm just going to have the cap standing by, and what you're going for here is basically washes, very light washes in different stages, from either very wet washes to washes where it's more over paint and just a little bit of water to kind of thin it out. You could use alcohol for this too if you want to. That's up to you. If you were using enamel paints or something like that, and you were a little more comfortable with those, you could use alcohol or stripper, mineral spirits, paint thinner, whatever, and that'd work also just as fine. So the area I'm going to be starting at the very top here is around the hatch, and I'm going to be working at the very top, kind of underneath the walkway platform here. This is going to be an important area, trying to represent some rust streaks. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, if I can get my camera or my leg kind of out of the way here, I don't want to really bump into this, but I'm just going to take my fine tip brush, and I'm going to dip it in the paint. Don't soak the brush in the paint. Remember, just a very, very small amount on the very tip of the bristles like that. You can see how very little there is. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just dip it in just a little bit of water. Just a little bit, not too much. And I'm just going to start. Well, I need to get this in a place where I'm not going to block this out, but I'm just going to get under here and just start streaking it down like this. Might have to go over these a couple times just to make sure that they're nice and straight. Oop, that could have been bad. But like I said, you might have to go over these several times. That line was a little bit kind of squiggly, that's why I had to go over it a second time. But this is basically what you're going to be doing. And I'm looking at some photos of a similar car, that's why I'm doing this off of. But I'm just going to start building these lines up in layers and just start working them into the side of the car here around the hatch. This one's pretty long here, but you're just going to keep streaking these down. And I'm not really applying the brush extremely hard to the side of the model either. It's literally just kind of floating onto the side of the body of the car rather. You don't want to just, you know, press this down or kind of just like scrub it. You don't want to do that. I see a lot of people do that, which is interesting. You want to avoid that. You just literally want the tip of the brush to just float on the side of the car here. I'm just going to put a hand on the car here also just to kind of secure it. But I'm just going to start going like this. And you're just going to build this up in layers like this. You can see how it's starting to kind of take shape here. But the key here is just building these in layers and putting one over the other is the key. That's what you want to do with this. Remember, the real thing, just like in the prototype, how rust works is it's basically one layer of rust over the other layer of rust. So you get a lot of mixed colors too, especially. That's why rust is an interesting. You can't just kind of pinpoint one particular color to rust. Rust can be a multiple different shades of colors from different shades of rust, or I mean orange, brown, sometimes a darker kind of sienna color. It's really mixed. So we're going to be going over this several times with different colors, which I'll show in just a second. But for now, I'm just going to keep layering these rust streaks around the hatch here. But what you see right now is basically what I'm going to be doing for the next couple of minutes onto the side of this car. And you can see even like some of these kind of more faded lines too, or these really subtle kind of rust streaks are also pretty effective as well. So I'm just going to keep building these up here, and I'll come back in a sec. Alright, so I got most of these streaks on there, and like I said, I was building these up in layers, so some of these are relatively light, others are more over a heavier layer of paint, and then some, like the lines like these that you see here, are more over kind of a washy, or rather a wash kind of a streak, where it's more over water mixed into the paint to give these effects. So that looks really good. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit more of my earth brown, and I'm just going to start putting the rust spots in here. And this is something that's really, I think, like an important, important detail effect on these models is to put these rust spots on. So I'm just going to start putting these on, just really small to start. I'm just kind of building them up. I'm just painting the dots on for now, but later on we'll go back and add the streaks to these. Also some kind of color variation as well when we get to it. But just kind of, put these wherever you think you need them. If you're looking at prototype photos too, just kind of follow those photos to kind of get the idea of where the spots are. There we go. I'm kind of working along the seam or the top seam of the car, though. It's kind of invisible on this, but there's the panel line difference, or a separation in the panel lines right along here, and that's where I'm putting these kind of rust spots kind of in here. I'm also going to scatter some a little lower here on the tank body as well. Might even do some scratches on the end, one of the ends of the car as well. That might add some interest. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and move it to the very end here. There we go. What I'm going to try to do now is paint the kind of some scratches under the car body side with a little bit more of the acrylic to kind of look like scratches from something rubbing up against the body of the car. Alright, so now I'm going to add some streaks to these rust spots that I've added by again taking the earth brown and basically making a wash out of it right on my brush here. A little bit lighter actually. There we go. Oh, one kind of came out a little bit funky. Hang on. You can kind of straighten these out sometimes with a Q-tip, which is nice. I'm actually going to do it to this one too, just to kind of see how it kind of straightens out the line a bit too. Kind of fades it out as well, like a real rust spot. So that's kind of nice. Alright, now we're going to add the color variations to some of this rust with a little bit of my burnt sienna paint here. Just a little bit. I'm going to make a little bit of a wash again and kind of make a little halo effect around some of these rust spots. A little bit too much there. Don't worry if you make mistakes like this too. You can always go back and kind of change them around to how you want them to be. And I found too, sometimes you'll make mistakes that you actually like. Like, I really like the halo effect I got from that little extra blotch of paint. It actually worked out pretty well, and just with a little bit of a kind of a dry Q-tip here, blotching it up, made a pretty decent effect. So sometimes these mistakes are a little bit more forgiving, so keep that in mind as well. Now what I'm going to do next is start working up at the very top of the hatch and start kind of connecting these rust streaks to around the hatch here. You can see what I'm doing though, I'm just kind of putting the base color of paint under there and then working it up to the hatch like this. I'm going to put a little extra of the rust color underneath the hatch as well. But you can see how I'm kind of connecting everything together here. And another thing we'll do later is add the kind of color variations with my burnt sienna as well in a minute. So kind of come back to that, but just really work the stuff in. Be patient with this. You'll see it kind of come to life here as you work it in like this. You can see how good that's starting to look as you work those colors into the finish. Start streaking them in a little bit. I'm really trying to create the color difference around this hatch, especially where the majority of the rust and the grime is. I'm going to kind of add a few little spots here and there too around this hatch. And a little bit around this covered dome here. Just kind of make another little wash and just start putting just some detail lines here and there. Just kind of try to create that streaking effect as well of the rust running down from these corroded spots like this. You can see how good that's starting to turn out though. It's looking really good. So I'm just going to kind of keep working this in then, and I'll come back here in a minute, show you where we're at, and we'll start laying in some different colors. So I went over these rust spots here with a little bit of the burnt sienna, and now I'm actually going to put in a little bit of the black paint, and this is just kind of to create a little bit more depth in some of these rust spots to kind of look a little bit more like pitting. And I've showed this before just a little bit, but I'm just going to go, I think it wouldn't hurt to kind of show this again, but you don't want to go too crazy with the black especially. Remember, just in a few little areas, but you can see it kind of adds a little bit more depth to some of these rust spots, so that's really nice. Alright, I'm going to zoom back in here, and I'm going to focus at the top of this hatch, and I'm going to add a little bit more color variation by taking, again, my burnt sienna, getting a little bit on the brush, and lightening it up with a little bit of water, and I'm just going to start working it in to add that color variation. You can see it adds a nice kind of a rusty tone to this. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of kind of some detail effects with chalk pastels to finish this rust streaking and all this up, to kind of add just a little bit more of color variation. And you can do this with a variety of different chalk pastels. What I'm using in particular is my earth brown, which is this shade here. And I'm also going to be using these micro brushes. If my camera will adjust, you can see I got a relatively large fine tip micro applicator, and then I got a very, very fine micro applicator as well. So what I'm going to start with is the big one here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a little bit of the chalk onto the brush, obviously, and we'll just start kind of working it in here. And I'm using the larger applicator, obviously, for the larger areas. where I need to cover a little bit more. You could use a small applicator for this too if you really wanted to. Either way it'll work, but just as long as you're applying the powder to it. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch to the small applicator and start working in these areas. And I'm kind of going with the streaks as well. Try to remember to, you know, follow the streaks down, especially. Like, as I kind of do it up here too, you'll see I'm just trying to follow these streaks in the path that the rain would travel down the side of this car. Just a little bit at a time, like I said. Don't rush this. And finally, I'm going to take a larger brush here and apply the chalks to the walkways on top here. You can see putting the grime on the walkways especially adds a nice bit of depth to them as well. A little bit on the top hatch here, and this one as well. Just a little bit, not too much. You can even apply, like, it doesn't hurt to even apply a little bit to these handrails as well, which I've already done just a little bit of beforehand, but you can see how nice that starts to look here. So here's the finished product after all that work. See, it looks pretty good, and hopefully this kind of inspires you guys on trying some of this out for yourself. For some of the newcomers who want to learn some of these techniques, hopefully this will help. So, looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. And this car's pretty much done, ready to go. I'm going to do a little bit more powder work on the trucks and underbody, and I'll pretty much call this model done. But hopefully the majority of this rust work on the top will kind of inspire you guys to try this for yourself. So, thanks for watching as always, and take care.